We are less than 3 months until the 2024 presidential election, and after a turbulent start for Democrats, Vice President Kamala Harris has taken full control of the campaign, bringing new energy to the ticket that many are saying feels like 2008 all over again. In just a few weeks, Harris has been able to sweep away former President Trump's lead in almost all of the battleground states, leveling the playing field and putting the Republican ticket on defense as they work to figure out how to refresh their strategy and come up with a plan to take on Democrats. Across the country, Harris and Walz have raked in record-setting fundraising numbers and brought crowds together not seen in a long time for Democrats. That's not sitting well with Trump, who's gone on Truth Social making wild claims the Harris campaign is using AI to inflate crowd sizes. Another point of attack for the former president and his allies is the fact that Harris has yet to sit for unscripted interviews, something the former president has done multiple times, including just this week with billionaire Trump supporter Elon Musk. But for now, Harris is riding high and pushing forward with momentum. Julia Manchester caught up with Decision Desk HQ's Scott Tranter to go over the latest numbers and where both candidates stand in the polls.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. Trump sat down with Elon Musk, the owner of X, for an interview on the platform last night or this week. It seems like we're getting definitely a more reserved version of Trump compared to recent public appearances. Wanted to get what your takeaways were from the interview.
Well, it was long. That's for sure. Look, this is what Donald Trump did in 2016. He's accepted every single interview. He would call in, he'd be out there. This is certainly a different strategy than we saw 6 months ago when he wouldn't even really debate some of the his GOP primary opponents. So I think that's reflective of what he thinks where he's at in the polls, which is, we're seeing a surging Kamala Harris.
Right. And we know that in the polls, some recent polls from battleground states show Kamala Harris surpassing Trump in 3 battleground states in particular, according to a New York Times Siena College poll, by 4 points in some of those states. This is a pretty major feat for Harris, who's only been in the race for a few weeks. How much of this can be attributed to her campaign's honeymoon phase, or is there something bigger at play here?
It's certainly a honeymoon phase, right? So she's getting a lot of good press, a lot of good coverage. Tim Walz had a little bit of a rocky start, but not as much as JD Vance. She's going into the convention. She has, as noted by the Trump campaign, not done very many, if any, on the record interviews thus far. Once those questions come and once those things come, we may see a hit in the polls. But right now she's enjoying a surge. And the question is will it last a long time?
Right. So, looking at all of the swing states together, where is the Harris campaign sitting right now? I know that she's made some gains in particular in some of these Sun Belt states, Georgia, North Carolina. Is that where we're going to see this election come down to?
Yeah, no, it's I feel like we always talk about Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and I think that's what we're going to continue to talk about. Interestingly enough, in the Hill DDHQ polling average, she's closed within 1 point in most of those states, 1.5 points in Michigan, which is much closer than Joe Biden was just a month ago. And so those are going to be the key states for either campaign. But you bring up Georgia and some of the Sun Belt states. One interesting thing to note this week, the Trump campaign laid out a whole bunch of new ad spending, a couple $1 million in all those states, but $23 million in the state of Georgia. Now, we've seen that polling average get close. Trump is still ahead by about 3 points. But the fact that he's putting so much money in Georgia tells us that the polls are probably moving a little bit faster there than other places. So it certainly looks like Harris has closed the gap and is trending the right way and making this a much more competitive race.
Right. And want to head out west to Nevada and Arizona. We know that Democrats are making a massive ad buy there. They're very much fighting to draw this contrast between Harris and Trump there. She was obviously there with Tim Walz last week. What message should Harris be focusing on in order to impact voters' opinions of her?
Well, she was recently in Nevada and she took a page from the Trump playbook and basically came out for, no taxes on tips, which was something that Donald Trump did in Nevada a couple months ago. She did that while accepting the culinary workers union, which is very powerful in Nevada. So she's being very aggressive out west in states that, quite frankly, Joe Biden was 5, 6, 7 points behind. And there's two close Senate races in those two states. And so that's her fight, not only for the presidency, but, potentially have a chance of saving the Senate.
Harris has shifted her stance on one issue that, impacts a lot of voters, particularly in Nevada, with the hospitality industry, and that's the tax on tips. Trump and his campaign say that she's taken a page from his playbook, saying that she will implement a no tax on tips policy. Obviously, a push in Nevada. Does this show, does this sort of, illustrate the strength of the hospitality and service industry in that state?
It absolutely does. I mean, when was the last time we saw a Republican and a Democratic presidential candidate agree on a major issue? It takes taxes on tips in a state like Nevada when they're both vying for union workers who are going to determine who wins that state. That's a huge issue. And something the Harris campaign has no shame in saying, we took it from Trump because it's a good idea. So that tells you how powerful that union is and how powerful an issue that is.
I want to move to a new poll that was released by the Financial Times and the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business that shows Harris leading Trump 42 to 41% when asked about who is trusted more to handle the economy. This is obviously a big deal, for Democrats, particularly in this election, because we saw when Biden was at the top of the ticket, he was doing, much worse when when voters were asked about how his handling of the economy, what they thought of that. Does this represent a major shift for voters going into the election? Can we expect this to last?
I'd like to see it in a couple more polls, but yes, that is a very significant shift because it has been pretty much widely polled over the last 2-3 years that Donald Trump and the Republicans have been more trusted on the economy. So this one poll is a canary in the coal mine, and we're going to see what that looks like over the next couple of months. But this is a definite shift and something that should have the Trump campaign worried.
I want to shift gears and go to the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. campaign. He suffered a major blow after a judge ruled this week that he should not appear on New York State's ballot, saying he falsely claimed New York residency and nominating positions despite living in California. Scott, do you think this could have a domino effect on his status in other states, or is this more of a New York-centric issue?
Yeah, no, I think this is the beginning of something. Look, the Democrats have been spending a little bit of time in super PAC money and a little bit of effort researching some of these ballot access laws in these various states. And now we're in mid-August, coming on to September. A lot of these states have to make decisions on these ballot applications over the next 2 to 4 weeks. And so this New York salvo is the first one we're going to see. I think we're going to see this fight play out in a few more states before it's all said and done.
Yeah, and we know that while Trump had hoped RFK staying in the race would cause more damage to the Democratic ticket, it seems like RFK is taking more support away from Trump himself. If RFK's campaign continues through November, how much of an impact could this have on Trump?
Look, it appears that RFK and some of the most recent polls we have over the last month takes slightly more from Trump than Biden. But here's the big stat. 6 weeks ago, in the Hill DDHQ RFK average, he was at about 8%. Today he's at 4%. So his support is cut in half. And 4% is right around where we see third-party candidates do in presidential elections, right before they end up getting 1 or 2% of the vote on election day. So I think the headline here is RFK's campaign is certainly losing its momentum, and the voters are kind of fleeing to their respective parties. I'm not sure how much of an effect he's going to have, except for some of these individual states like a Pennsylvania or potentially a Michigan, where, even if he takes a half a point, that might be the difference maker.
And as always, Scott, before I let you go, what is the latest Decision Desk forecasting up now with Trump versus Harris?
So give you a little preview. It's going to be launched publicly next week, but I was fooling around with it this morning. Look, we've got Harris ahead. Her surging in all these different states, her spectacular fundraising. Now it's going to be still razor close, but I would expect Harris, when we launch it next week, to probably be a 54 to 56% favorite, which is not where it was. Trump was the favorite when we were talking a month ago. So this is certainly a change in the race.
Yeah, it's amazing how much can change in a month. Scott Tranter, as always, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.